this is, as was introduced, Brain Insights on the Power of Focus. So it's all about attention. And so we are going to get into the way in which the brain focuses attention and how that makes a difference, and then how you can use that understanding to make a positive difference. Well, this is a little overview. I know I was just introduced, but this just gives you a visual introduction of a little bit about who I am. I just have a passion to share the understanding of how children's brains develop, how we can contribute to those brains developing so positively based on the neuroscience that we have available. When I started my education in early childhood development, it was so long ago that we didn't have the brain research to show and demonstrate what was going on in those young children's brains. So we have this opportunity now to use this wealth of knowledge to be providing what children need most. And so my goal, and I teasingly, but really mean it, is to make this common knowledge for everyone. We need everyone to understand what children need most. And that's why this conference is so heartwarming, that all of this kind of information is being shared so that this can happen for more and more and more, ultimately all children. So anyway, that's a little bit of sharing my passion behind being here and sharing this with you today. So I want to begin, we're focusing on attention, and I want to begin by focusing attention on you. You are, what I often say to audiences is, you are brain developers. That's what your job is. And what if the world realized that that's what your profession is, that you are brain developers? So applause to you and attention to you and the important and critical work that you are doing to make a positive difference in this world. So let's get into it by beginning to look away from the screen right now and look around the location where you're at and notice what you see as you look around. Now, I want you to focus your attention on what do you hear? And what do you feel? What just happened by me asking you to look around and to determine what you can see and what you can hear and what you can feel, it refocused your attention. You were focusing on the screen and you were focusing on what I was sharing. But I asked you to refocus your attention, and you started looking and seeing and hearing and feeling things differently than you had been prior to me asking you to refocus your attention. So I'm going to get back to that point in a second, but I want to begin by explaining that the brain is experience dependent. And you may know that, but the majority of the world doesn't fully realize this, that the brain is dependent on experiences to physically make connections in the brain and physically grow and develop and organize the brain. So if you're working you're talking with parents, it's important that you help them realize that the experiences that you are providing are creating these connections in a child's brain. And the experiences that they are providing are creating connections in their brain to physically grow and develop. So in 1996, Newsweek magazine put out this statement that Early childhood experiences exert a dramatic and precise impact, physically determining how the intricate neural circuits of the brain are wired. This is how they stated it. And the way I share this information is sharing it in simple, understandable terms. Basically, what that's saying is that the early childhood experiences are physically growing the brain, as I was just saying. And so it is those early childhood experiences that are having a great impact, because this is the time that when the brain is most malleable and taking in those experiences and having the most rapid brain growth. So what we're going to just do is talk a little bit about this brain development, and then we'll get into more detail about how focused attention impacts that. So the brain, as I said, is developing based on experiences. You're providing all of these experiences every day and every moment that you're interacting with these children. And what happens is there's thousands and billions of connections being made. We are born with 86 billion brain cells that are not all connected yet. The brain isn't fully finished developing at birth. That's why the preschool years and the kindergarten years are so critically important, because those are the times that the brain is making these connections at the most rapid rate. And so 9 months wasn't enough time to complete the development of a brain. So it continues to develop after birth so that we have this opportunity to provide the most optimal experiences. So it just continues to make these connections rapidly based on all these experiences that are being provided, and the examples that were shown already, that those are all those experiences creating these connections between the 86 billion brain cells. And it's happening at a rate, do you know this? At a rate of about 1 million per second. Scientists used to say that it was about 800 a second that were being made. But now they know it's more like 1 million connections are being made every second. That's why you are brain developers. You're providing those opportunities for those connections to be made. And what happens is it gets to a point where there's so many connections that have been made that it's like overflowing with connections, like this closet. Or do you have that drawer in the kitchen that you just keep putting things in and it just gets overfilled and disorganized? Well, that's what happens with the brain. From all these experiences that have happened, the brain gets filled with all of these connections, and then it gets, like this picture, disorganized and overfilled. So what the brain does then is it starts eliminating some of those connections. It's called pruning. It prunes away the connections so that the brain can become more organized, like this. So the brain is going to eliminate some of those connections, as I said. So when I made that statement that it's going to eliminate connections, did you start thinking about, well, wait, what connections are eliminated? Are they the wonderful experiences of climbing on a log or exploring in the ocean? What determines which connections get eliminated? Well, let's look back to this closet. If you were going to organize this closet, what things would you get rid of? You would get rid of the things that you don't use very often, right? That aren't used frequently, or that drawer in the kitchen. You take out the things that aren't frequently used. That's exactly what the brain does. It eliminates the connections from experiences that didn't happen very frequently, that aren't used very frequently. So in the example that was just given about reading to older adults, that's a good example of, if a child were to just have an experience of reading very, very seldom, the brain would think, oh, I guess this isn't very important. It doesn't happen in my life very often. So it eliminates those connections. But because of these repeated experiences, that are happening over and over again, the brain holds on to those connections. I guess this is important for my life. I guess I need to know this skill. So it holds on to those connections from experiences that are happening most frequently, experiences that are repeated. So you'll often see children doing repetitive experiences, right? They're doing what their brain needs. And I'll go into more detail about that as we go on. So it's really helpful to understand, and that clarifies the importance of providing the most optimal experiences, which this whole conference is all about, right? So what happens then is all those connections are created and wired together to create what is called pathways. And it's just like the path on the ground. If we go over and over the ground repeatedly, a path is created. It's just the same in the brain. A strong pathway is created in the brain from repeated experiences. So what if we decided to go over the fence and through the grass in the other direction? The first time we went that way, would much happen? No, not much would happen. But what if we went that way repeatedly? We would create a new pathway, right? That's what's happening when we're providing learning experiences. They're creating new pathways from new experiences that happen. Now, if that old pathway was continued to be repeated, that pathway would stay in place. What if there's some behaviors or learning or habits or things that we do not want that pathway to be used repeatedly and strengthened? By creating going a new direction, creating new pathways, that's giving the opportunity to create the more positive pathways that we want, if there were pathways we wanted to reduce or eliminate. But just because we start going the new direction and not repeating the old pathway experiences, it doesn't go away immediately, does it? It takes time, it takes patience, it takes repetition to make changes later. So that's why the early childhood years are, again, so critically important. If we want to develop brains as positively as possible, what we want to do is provide those most positive experiences repeatedly in the early years, rather than having to make changes later. So now that we have that basis, let's get into the topic of focused attention. Focused attention actually changes the brain. The brain connections that we've been talking about physically change as a result of the way in which we focus our attention. She looks pretty focused, doesn't she? So at a pace of 1 million connections per second, she is making some new connections. And there's something called the reticular activation system, or RAS for short. And this describes and explains the reticular activation system, the ability to filter out information from external sources and focus on one particular fact, detail, or thought is controlled by this brain region. If it weren't for this circuitry, our consciousness would be overwhelmed and flooded with all sensory information, leading to an inability to make decisions. So that's going to be a basis for a lot of what we talk about as we go further. So the reticular activation system is responsible for something that's called habituation. Habituation is the filtering out, like we just talked, the RAS we just talked about. It's the filtering out. So remember when I asked you to look around and to determine what you can see in the room and hear and feel? What you were doing prior to me asking you to do that was you were habituating. You were putting all of that information in the background. So you weren't having the stimulation of all that was what you could feel and what you could hear and what you could see, all coming at you continuously. What your brain did is it filtered out so you could focus on the screen and focus on what I was sharing with you. So this example is, just imagine being in that classroom. There's a lot of sensory input going on, right? First of all, lots of sensory, I mean, visual, and just think of the sound that could be going on in that classroom. And then look at that, I assume a mother looking at that green poster in the front. She's really focused, right? Her attention is focused. She is filtering out all of that other sensory input so that she could pay attention to what was on that poster. So that's what habituation is. But when we're working with young children and they are still developing their brain, this is a great quote from Alison Gopnik, she's just fabulous. If you haven't followed her, she shares wonderful research. And she makes the statement, "We often say that young children are bad at paying attention. But what we really mean is that they're bad at not paying attention, that they don't screen out the world as grown-ups do." So again, some of those examples that were shared with us this morning, that exploration and that curiosity and that trial and error and all those positive things that were happening was because those children were focusing their attention and they were taking in everything. Their attention was focused on all of what they were experiencing. So one way we need to take that for the positivity that it is, so that they can explore and learn what they're curious about and what they have wonder and interest in. We also need to be aware of these kind of situations where maybe we're providing more than is able for children to handle, and especially some sensory sensitive children that have a difficulty in processing and get overwhelmed. So most children that is the case, but then there's some that are even more sensitive, right? So we need to take in that realization that they don't have those really well-developed abilities to do the habituation and screen out, which is the brain's design, so that they can be learning about the world and having these experiences. So have you ever had this experience? You have a regular route you drive often, and you get home and you realize you hadn't focused your attention on the whole way? Have you had that experience? So the reason I ask is because those of you that have had that experience, what you can realize is that you were focusing your attention on something other than your driving. You might have been thinking about what you were going to do when you got home, or what happened at school today. And this is what our brain has the ability to do. So if that was the case for you, and you were driving and thinking about something other than your drive, but something new or different appeared, like this yellow house had previously been blue, and all of a sudden now it's painted yellow. It catches your attention. Something new or different catches the brain's attention. You've probably noticed that a lot with children, right? You provide something new or different, like some of the experiences that were shared again today, that you take the children out in the forest, take the children to the shore, and provide some new items in the classroom, some new loose parts or some, new situation. It catches their attention, right? If something's new or different, the brain is going to tune into it. The brain is focused primarily on survival. So this is built in for the brain to be prepared if something is new or different, and then it can determine, is it safe or not safe? So that's what the brain naturally going to do. So we can get children's attention focused by providing something new or different and excite their interest. It's all based, as I was just saying, on the stress response system. So the stress response system is always unconsciously scanning the environment and the people in it for safety. So it is, again, going to focus on, is this something that's safe? I need to check this out. What is this? Is it going to harm me? Or is it okay? Can I explore this further? So realizing that that's what the brain is going to do is a benefit to you providing the experiences, and understanding some children are going to be hesitant about new experiences. So that opportunity to provide support for children that maybe their stress response system was activated, and we can have that understanding to provide what they need and the relationship to buffer that fear. The brain also does not like overstimulation or understimulation. If there's too much going on, the brain it gets dysregulated and it needs to get back to being regulated. So if something is overstimulating, it needs to avoid. If the brain is feeling understimulated, like there's nothing stimulating or interesting that I can focus on or pay attention to right now, the brain doesn't like that either. It likes balance. The brain likes to be balanced. So just think about if you go for an appointment and you're sitting in a waiting room. Do you just sit there and do absolutely nothing? Or do you pick up your phone and look at your phone, or pick up a book or a magazine? You do something, right? Children also are going to do the same thing. And if they're, again, as I said, if they're overstimulated, they're going to shut down. So the brain likes that balance. I've created a couple of what I call neuronurturing interaction packets, and a couple of them are on this specific topic. And that came up because this was in a situation with infants. I was in a classroom doing some consulting work, and this well-intentioned childcare provider was shaking a rattle in the face of this baby and talking to this baby. So she was trying to provide this experience for this baby and talking to the baby about, what did you hear? What do you see? And it got to be too much for that baby. And you could see that baby turning away and trying to avoid all of that stimulation. At the same time, there was another baby in that same classroom that was strapped into a carrier, placed in a crib, and looking at a blank wall. So that baby had no opportunity to move freely and had nothing stimulating to look at or listen to. So that baby was understimulated. So inattention. Sometimes we see a child staring off into space, and it appears that they're not focused. They're not paying attention to what we want to be providing for them. But is it always really inattention? A lot of times children are pondering something, thinking about something, daydreaming. And what science has demonstrated is that when child or adult is daydreaming, the brain is very, very active. Imagination is actually one of the highest functioning areas of the brain. So it may not be that they're inattentive. And also, they may be avoiding the overstimulation also. Maybe they need to look in a different direction to listen to what's being said. There's engaged attention, and you can almost see it right? when children are very engaged, almost see their brain connections being made, right? Look at this boy on the right that's concentrating so hard and focusing on getting those blocks in place without knocking down his tower. He has very focused attention. These children working together also have very engaged attention. They're very purposeful in what they are doing. So when a child is having very focused attention, what we want to do is avoid interruption of that process. So this is another example. This child obviously has focused attention, trying to put this little number train together. So what we want to do is let that child continue to focus their attention while it is focused. So we don't want to go up and, I mean, I know it's well-intentioned to say, oh, I see you're putting the train together. Oh, you have them all hooked. And let's see, does 3, 2, 4, is that the way it goes? Or should we move it and change it around and so that it's 2, 3, 4? You know, what you want to do is let them process what they are processing. They may not be focusing on what order the numbers are right now. They might be just focusing on eye-hand coordination to put the train together. Or how does this work? How does it hook together? And they're processing something. We may not know what that is. So what we want to do is wait until the child invites us in. So they might say, look at what I did. Look what I created. I put the train together. Was something like that. Then we can engage with them and ask, are you proud of yourself? Or engage in some way. But we don't want to interrupt while they're in the process of what they are understanding, learning, curious about, trying, all of that. Respecting their attention. So this baby is obviously learning something right now, looking at, determining, figuring out what is happening. And so we want to respect that, their attention right now. If we were going to transition them to some other activity, we want to pause and just let them focus their attention and give them that opportunity. All right, and we talked about the importance of repetition. And what children do is they do activities, as I mentioned earlier, they do activities over and over repeatedly because that is exactly what their brain needs. They are verifying that what they have experienced is true. And I often use this example of a baby sitting in a high chair. So they have this ball, and can you picture this? The baby leans over and throws the ball on the floor. And they lean over to see, what does that ball do when I throw it on the floor? Oh, it bounced and it rolled. So what do we as adults typically do? We pick it up and we give it back to them, right? We're doing what their brain needs as well. And what is he going to do again? He's going to throw it on the floor, lean over and watch it bounced and rolled. Oh, I throw a ball on the floor, it bounces and rolls. I throw it on the floor, it bounces and rolls. He is creating that strong pathway through that repetition of the experience and focused attention. So now we gave him some scrambled eggs to eat, and he's had enough to eat. What does he do with the rest of the scrambled eggs? He throws them on the floor, right? And he leans over and watches. Oh, those didn't bounce and roll. I got to try that again. And now he's verifying, if I throw scrambled eggs on the floor, they don't bounce and roll. I am learning about the world and how it works and creating pathways about how the world works as a result of these repeated experiences and verifying that those experiences are true. Now, redirecting focused attention. Sometimes we might want to and need to redirect focused attention. There may be instances where that's a positive thing, or we just need to get that child refocused. And using screens is a perfect example of that. They have really focused attention when they're using a screen, don't they? So how do we refocus their attention when they're so engaged like that? Maybe it's been enough time that we've determined it would be better and more healthy for a child to not continue using the screen or some other activity. And the best way of helping to redirect that attention is to engage with them in what they are focused on. So come and join in with, and maybe ask, what are you looking at? What are you seeing? What are you focused on? So before I said don't interrupt them, but in these situations, this is the time that you might want to. So by entering into where their attention is focused first, it helps to bring them back to the real world. It's a good technique that brings them back. So refocuses their attention in a new way by engaging with them and with you. And then male attention. There's research that shows that there are some differences, biological differences between males and females in learning and processing and vision and hearing, and also in the way they focus attention. And this research that I'm referring to on focused attention, it states that with males, and I'm going to make huge generalizations when I say males, because we all fall somewhere within this spectrum of totally male and totally female. So this is a generalization about a male brain is going to more likely focus their attention on something and then kind of like shut down before it switches to a new thing to focus on. It's going to refocus after it shuts down a bit and then refocus, which is a bit different than a female brain can switch from one activity to another more easily without that shutting down process occurring. And then emotions. Emotions catch our attention also. So what we are feeling is going to impact the way in which we focus attention. So helping kids realize what the emotions that they're feeling can help them work through whatever those emotions are. As I said, those focused attention on emotions can disrupt the learning process. So helping them work through emotions really guides them back to a positive way of focusing their attention. And their body as well. So the body is going to give us a way of focusing attention. This is how I'm feeling. This is what my body needs. And so realizing that, and especially with kids that are needing to move, right? They just need to. That's how they learn. Their body teaches them a lot. Their body teaches their brain how to think. So they need to have that opportunity to move and feel what their body is telling them that they need to do. So a lot of times it's believed that children need to sit still and listen and have eye contact and those kinds of things. But if their body is telling them to move and someone tells them that they need to sit still, what is going to happen is the focus is going to be on, how do I sit still? How do I sit still? And that's going to be the focus of the attention rather than on what is being shared, like a book being read or a lesson being taught. So that child cannot focus attention when their body has to move. So if they need to lay down or fidget or do something to regulate themselves, that's something important to understand. All right. So now we're going to do something fun. You've been listening a lot. And so we're going to be doing an activity. It's a quick activity using our focused attention to our benefit. And we're going to get into how this can all apply and be helpful in the interactions you have with children. So, as I said, this is just a quick activity. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to advance my slides very quickly. Each slide has a photograph on it and of people. And what I want you to do as I go through the slides, I want you to count how many males you see in the photographs, in the total. So total up and count how many males you see as I progress through the slides. Not too difficult, right? You just need to focus your attention, right? All right. How many males did you see? Now, how many polar bears did you see? Let's go back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 polar bears. Did some of you not see the polar bears? What happens is that you miss the polar bears. This is a activity that I created to simulate an activity that maybe some of you have seen, or an experiment, I should say. An experiment, 6 people on 2 teams, 3 people on each team, 3 in white shirts and 3 in black shirts. And each team is passing a basketball amongst each other, and they're all walking around passing this basketball back and forth. And you're asked to count how many times one of those teams passes the basketball. So you're counting how many times they pass this basketball. And then the video stops, and you're asked how many times did they pass the basketball. And then they replay the video again. And what you see when you rewatch it and you're not counting any longer, what you see is there's a man in a gorilla costume that walks right through the middle of these people passing basketballs, and you don't see it. It's amazing. So if you Google it, you can find that, or go to YouTube and ask for the basketball experiment, and you'll find that. It's quite amazing. So yeah, the way we focus attention really makes a difference. So we can use that to our benefit. First of all, I want to make the point that the brain can only focus attention on one thing at a time. So when you were focusing on counting the males, that's what your brain was focused on. Some of you may have caught that there was a polar bear in the picture, and then you were only counting the polar bears and not counting the males. So it can only focus on one thing at a time. And one of the most difficult things to try to do at the same time is read and listen. That's competing for the exact same brain area. So that's why whenever I put text up on the screen, I always read the text that's on the screen, because it's so hard to try to read that as I would be talking. So reading and listening is the most difficult, but we can only focus attention on one thing at a time. We can do more than one thing at a time, like the example of driving and thinking about what we're going to do when we get home. We can do both of those things. We just can only focus on one at a time. So, focused attention to support your beliefs. What the brain also does is it focuses on whatever is going to support our belief. And that goes back to that reticular activation system. It filters out what doesn't support our beliefs. So we're going to get into, well, then how does that apply to interacting with children? So this is I know you work with younger children, but this certainly applies, but this is an example of a dad of a 9-year-old daughter. And he had the belief that his daughter was irresponsible. She is so irresponsible. And today she didn't feed the dog, which is her responsibility. She forgot her homework at school, and she left her dishes on the table. Oh, she's so irresponsible. What am I going to do about that? On that same day, that daughter did these responsible behaviors. She returned her library book. She put her dirty clothes in the laundry, and she brushed her teeth without even being asked. So she had these responsible behaviors. But guess what? because the father had the belief that she was so irresponsible, he focused on these behaviors and he didn't see these polar bears, right? He only was focusing on what was supporting his belief. Attention to beliefs, our self-perception is being developed and reinforced as the brain develops based on beliefs. And self-perception then drives behavior and learning and capabilities and confidence and all of that. So our attention to beliefs really makes a difference and physically wires in the brain. And beliefs can be transferred. So this father could bring her attention to her irresponsible behaviors. And he might say to her, you didn't feed the dog, you forgot your homework at school, you left your dishes on the table, see how irresponsible you are? You are so irresponsible. What if that happens repeatedly, over and over and over again, that he's telling her that she's irresponsible and focusing her attention in that way? And she was feeling really good. She was focusing her attention on, I returned my library book today. I put my dirty clothes in the laundry and I brushed my teeth without even being asked. She was feeling really good and having the focused attention on those responsible behaviors. But with the refocusing and that repetition of the irresponsible behaviors, her beliefs in herself and her self-perception might be changed by father transferring those beliefs, and her attention might be now more focused on, oh yeah, dad is right. I am irresponsible. I didn't do that. I didn't do that. And I didn't do that. Oh yeah, I am irresponsible. And thoughts are also experiences in the brain. Whatever we think about repeatedly is also making connections in the brain. It's not always physical experiences. There's an abundance of research that shows our thinking, our imagination, the feelings that go along with it, all are experiences impacting the brain and making connections and pathways. So, with that understanding, what can we do? We can refocus our attention toward the positives. Put our attention, when we are working with children, on the positives. And I know that came out in some of the presentations earlier, that we want to focus on the strengths and the abilities and helping those children realize their learning. I love that point that was being made about helping them realize the learning that they're doing and be part of it. So here are some techniques that can be implemented. First of all, refocusing the attentions. Once the attention is refocused on the positives, then we need to tell the child. We noticed, we saw, we need to observe and then tell the child. Not just keep it to ourselves and record it, but let them know. So in this example, this little girl comes up to you and shows you the picture that they drew. And our natural response would be something like, good job, beautiful picture, something to that effect, right? That's a common type of response. She looks quite happy about it, right? So we want to reinforce and say something positive about it. But what I suggest is even more advantageous for the child is that we help turn it around for the child to self-evaluate. As I was just saying, one of the presenters was pointing out how important that is. So we want to turn it around for them to self-evaluate rather than depending on our judgment of it. So by us saying, beautiful picture, good job, we are doing the evaluating. We're determining if it's good or valuable. we're putting a judgment on it. Instead, what's more advantageous is to say, wow, you look proud of your picture. Or ask her, are you proud of what you did? And if we do that, she is learning to self-evaluate rather than becoming dependent on the opinion and judgment of others. And if we do that by asking, are you proud of what you did? She can say, yes, I didn't know I could draw like that. I didn't know I was going to be able to do this. She can make that kind of statement, or she might say, you know what? I'm going to try again. I think I can do even better. Because if we just say good job, we're setting the bar right there. And what we want to do is let them encourage that further learning and that reevaluation, right? Using your tone of voice. Using your tone of voice is very important. The brain tunes into tone of voice, and especially females. You can use your tone of voice in positive, encouraging ways. We're using tone of voice that sounds like a threat or demands and commands. It activates that stress response system of the brain. If we're using a tone of voice that's caring and encouraging and positive, we are encouraging, activating the higher functioning areas of the brain for more learning and acceptance and positive interactions. If a child is feeling threatened or fearful, the learning part of the brain, the cognitive higher functioning areas of the brain shuts down because it's in a threatening situation. So it's going to only focus on survival now and not focus on what the learning opportunity might be. So using tone of voice really matters. You can say the exact same words and be activating different areas of the brain. You can say, come here, in a really stern, strong, threatening kind of voice, right? Or you can say, come here. And that's activating the care systems of the brain. So tone of voice really matters. And like I said, research shows that females are even more tuned into tone of voice. And children that have had adversity in their life are especially tuned into tone of voice to determine if they are safe. And using nonverbal communication is also very important. The brain really tunes into nonverbal communication right from day one. A baby is looking at you and observing your facial expressions, and kids respond to smiles, thumbs up, high fives, pats on the back, right? All of those kinds of things. It's, again, based on the survival of the brain. The brain needs to tune in. Is this safe? As I said, it's unconsciously scanning the environment and the people in it for safety. So if you're giving those encouraging, positive reinforcements, the brain is going to be more in a learning state, and it's going to be more regulated, and it's going to feel good and continue learning and experiencing positive things. But if it's feeling any kind of fear, all of that is going to get shut down. So when we have the positive attention on the positive behaviors and actions of a child, and we're reinforcing them with the positives, all those positive connections are going to be made in the brain. So here you can see what makes up what we hear. Look at this. 7% is the words we use. So words, of course, are important. As I pointed out earlier, the way we use those words and the way we tell the child and encourage them to feel good about themselves is very, very important. And like the example with the dad calling her irresponsible, that matters. But compare it to the use of tone of voice. The way it's said is 38%, and body language is 55%. Again, all based on the way in which the brain focuses for survival. Another technique is when you've been focusing attention on the positives and you want to communicate that to the child, you can leave a note. Leave them a note. I love being your teacher, or whatever positive. Just think about how little we get notes, paper, physical notes these days. So leaving a note is very meaningful. Or if you get a card in the mail, it really means something. Or a child draws you a picture and writes a little note on it. It means a lot. Well, we need to do that for the children as well. There's a story I read about a father who traveled a lot for work, and he would leave a sticky note for his daughter every time he was leaving for a work trip. And after a while, he thought, well, maybe I don't need to be leaving those notes anymore. She never says anything about them. Maybe they aren't meaningful to her. But then one night he was putting her to bed, and he saw on the back of her bedroom door, she had saved every single one of those notes. They were stuck to the back of her door. So they did mean a lot. So sometimes we don't even know, but leaving a note is another positive way of reinforcing from our positive focused attention. And then this is a technique that works well for many people, where we keep track. So earlier it was talked about observing, right? So if we're observing and our attention is focused on the positives and we're keeping track, we just do it for ourselves. And we don't do it like on a behavior chart or something that the child even knows that you're keeping track. But you have the focused attention. So say the example of the father. I'm going to start keeping track of all of her responsible behaviors. And he starts doing that with the refocused attention. And what usually happens is an aha moment occurs. Like, wow, she's much more responsible than I realized. Another example in a classroom was I suggested this technique to a teacher who had a little boy that was hitting. She was concerned that he was hitting too much in the classroom, hitting the other children. And so I said, what if you refocus your attention and watch all the times that he isn't hitting? And she started keeping track. And she had the aha moment. And she realized, oh my gosh, he was not hitting as much as I thought he was. It was just that I was so focused on trying to help him not hit that I thought it was a bigger problem than it actually was. And by keeping track, she was able to notice when those times of him hitting were occurring. It turned out it was most often like right before they were able to go outside or right before snack time, when he was having physical needs and he was frustrated and he was dysregulated, and this was his way of handling it. So she was able to help support him prior to a situation of him hitting, because she had more of that understanding, just because she was keeping track. So stop and think about, what do you pay attention to? We're all well-intentioned. We do the best for children. We want them to have the most positive behaviors, right? So stop and think about, well, what do you pay attention to? You're trying to change for a child or turn around. Well, is there a way that you can refocus your attention on the positives and notice that the strengths that they do have, or the opposite behaviors that are occurring, and refocus your attention? And then what about doing it for yourself? Think about, what do you pay attention to for yourself? Because what do we often do for ourselves, or to ourselves, I should say? At the end of the day, we often do, oh, I should have handled that better. I should have done that differently. What if, oh, I didn't get that done? And we go through a list in our heads and get our reticular activation system going, because once we start focusing on, I didn't do this, I should have done that, the brain is going to refocus and pull in, or focus on that and pull in all kinds of evidence that is going to support that to be true. But what if you switch your attention and start thinking about, well, I did get that done, and I really liked how I handled that, and oh, that interaction with that child was so wonderful, and have our reticular activation system focused on what we did do well. Because I guarantee you, you did a million more positive things throughout the day than you did the few things that you weren't feeling good about. So refocus your attention for yourself as well. So here, this isn't a poll question, but just what do you see on this screen? Do you see an orange dot? Or do you see a big white rectangle? There's much more of the big white rectangle than the orange dot, right? But we often focus on that orange dot, and we need to stop and think about focusing on all the positives. Focus our attention on all the positives that we do every day, because you are. So what I'd like you to do now is just take a couple minutes and think about, what do you already do that makes a difference? Just think of 3 things quickly, because you're doing them. And now, what new things will you do to make a difference based on what you've been learning so far today? What new things will you do to make a difference? And focus on those and put your attention on those. When we know better, we do better, right? And the time is now. We can focus our attention on all of the positives that we do, that the children are doing, and it will make a positive difference. So if you learned something new today, tell someone, or actually everyone you know, because we need this understanding to be everywhere, right? The children depend on the adults in their lives, whether they're interacting directly or indirectly, to make a positive difference in their lives. So this is just a slide of, I love connecting with people that care about children and families. So this is my contact information. I would welcome you reaching out and connecting. And most importantly, I thank you for the incredibly important work you're doing. And I will continue to share to help the world realize that you are the brain developers making a difference in children's lives.
Thank you, Deborah. On behalf of everyone here, I want to extend our sincere appreciation for your exceptional contribution to today's event. Your insights will undoubtedly continue to shape the way we approach early childhood education. Your ability to make complex concepts accessible and engaging is a true gift, and it has left lasting impression on us.
Well, I so appreciate that. Thank you very much. I'm glad to know that. And again, it was such a pleasure being invited to be able to share with everyone here. We are making a difference, aren't we?
Yeah, each moment, every day.
Each moment, yes.
Yes. Thank you, Deborah, for your remarkable presentation, for sharing your expertise with us. Your work is making positive difference in the life of countless children, and we are truly grateful.
Thank you again, and I'm grateful to every single one of you.